Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Aaron. U.S. warplanes continue to hit ISIS targets in Syria, targeting the stronghold of Raqqa. They're also drying up the terror group's money supply by bombing oil refineries that generate millions of dollars a day. Meanwhile, the debate over the president's strategy to take down ISIS continues. Some are even questioning the way he views the terror group. When he announced his plan to defeat ISIS, he made it a point to declare that the Islamic State is not Islamic. In fact, the president often says radical jihadists are not true followers of Islam. But a number of former Muslims say the president has it wrong.
In both his primetime speech to the nation and his UN speech to the world, President Obama defined Islam and the Islamic State as he sees them.
At the same time, we have reaffirmed again and again that the United States is not and never will be at war with Islam. Islam teaches peace.
ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim.
It may not be the Islam President Obama wants, but some former Muslims say the religion and practices embraced by the Islamic State come straight from the Quran.
They are following Islam's Prophet Muhammad in every detail.
Brother Rashid is a former Muslim who grew up in Morocco. He hosts the television show Daring Question and gave this response to President Obama's claim.
I can tell you with confidence that ISIL speaks for Islam. Allow me to correct you, Mr. President. ISIL is a Muslim organization. Its name stands for Islamic State. So even the name suggests that it is an Islamic movement.
He quoted chapter and verse from the Quran.
You think that ISIL does not speak for Islam because they beheaded an American and they killed those whom they consider infidels. In fact, beheading is commanded in the Quran, in Surah 47, the 4th verse. It says, when you meet the unbelievers in fight, smite at their necks.
So this idea that what ISIS is doing is un-Islamic is not true at all. It's pure Islamic.
And former Muslim Noni Darwish says it all leads to the ultimate goal stated in the Quran.
The goals of the Islamic State is to empower itself to control the whole of the Middle East and expand to achieve the goals of Islam, of converting the whole world into one Islamic State, forcing Islam on the rest of the world.
Rashid adds that just because these radicals kill other Muslims, it does not make them un-Islamic.
You might ask, then why does ISIL kill other Muslims? The answer is that they consider them infidels, not Muslims.
Both Rashid and Darwish warn that political correctness masks the true danger of ISIL and puts the whole world at risk.
People have to wake up because the essence of our Judeo-Christian values and our way of life is at stake.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The FBI says it has identified the masked terrorists who appeared in the beheading videos released by ISIS. 2 Americans and a British hostage were killed. Director James Comey would not reveal the name or nationality of the British accented man who's become known as Jihadi John. Officials think he's somewhere in Syria, and they say finding him will be difficult. Authorities are using facial and voice analysis. Computer simulations constructed a composite of the man's face to compare with photos of known terrorists. Director Comey also issued a clarification about the number of Americans fighting in Syria. He says only about a dozen Americans are actually fighting alongside Muslim extremist groups. The director says previous reports that 100 American citizens are fighting in Syria have been misinterpreted. More than 100 have tried to go and failed, or successfully went and are back home already. Americans who have returned after fighting with extremist groups are under investigation or have been arrested. At least 2 Americans have been killed in the fighting, and at least 13 have been arrested. Well, thousands of new illegal immigrants are failing to report to deportation hearings. The Department of Homeland Security recently disclosed that 70% of immigrants who had entered the country during the summer have not reported as ordered and instead vanished into the interior of the country. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense is expanding an existing program that would allow a small number of undocumented immigrants to join the military. The program will be open to immigrants without a proper visa if they came to the U.S. with their parents before they turned 16. Well, President Obama is looking for a new attorney general today. Eric Holder has resigned after 6 years of service. He is a close friend of the president's, but as White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon reports, not everyone is sorry to see him go.
I come to this moment with very mixed emotions.
He's the nation's first black attorney general and one of President Obama's most liberal cabinet members. He's controversial, plagued by scandal, a constant thorn in the side of conservatives, and one of the president's top allies in Washington.
Thanks to his efforts, since I took office, the overall crime rate and the overall incarceration rate have gone down by about 10%. That's the first time that they've declined together at the same time in more than 40 years.
Holder was recently called on to focus on an issue close to his heart, civil rights, overseeing federal response to social unrest in Ferguson, Missouri, following the shooting death of a black teen by a white police officer. But his critics say Holder turned the Justice Department into an arm of the president's political operation, using his power as top cop to deny justice in some cases, even punishing some journalists for digging too deep.
The Department of Justice has been this block of not allowing the truth to come out. So I'm glad he's leaving.
He's talking, among other things, about the Justice Department's refusal to turn over documents related to Fast and Furious, the gun running scandal in which the ATF lost some 14,000 guns in Mexico, including 2 that surfaced at the murder scene of a U.S. Border Patrol agent. His actions led Congress for the first time to hold an attorney general in contempt.
Addressing conduct.
Holder also refused to defend in court the Defense of Marriage Act, a federal law defining marriage as a union between one man and one woman. He even encouraged state attorneys general to follow his lead if they found traditional marriage laws discriminatory. And for many Americans, the list continues, including his investigation of the IRS, targeting conservative political groups applying for tax-exempt status.
He was in charge of the Justice Department when they were running guns to Mexico, to illegal gangs, and that the IRS, right under their nose, was engaged in illegal activity. That's the legacy of the Attorney General.
Holder's legacy will be debated for years, but for now, the commander-in-chief must find a replacement for the remaining 2 years of his term. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
The U.S. is considering softening its demands that Iran end its uranium enrichment program. Months of negotiations between Iran and 6 world powers have failed to shrink the future capacity of Iran's enriched uranium. The U.S. believes the regime will use it to make nuclear warheads. Now it's considering a proposal that allows Tehran to keep nearly half of the program, but puts constraints on possible paths to developing nuclear weapons. Iran says it wants to use the technology for peaceful purposes. Well, today marks 2 years since Iran threw American pastor Saeed Abedini in prison for his Christian faith. And on the eve of the anniversary, believers around the world prayed for Pastor Saeed and his family. At a prayer vigil in Washington, his kids sang a worship chorus and his wife Naghmeh led a silent march around the White House. Other speakers included Jay Sekulow and Jordan Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice, as well as Reverend Franklin Graham, who prayed for Pastor Saeed and persecuted Christians around the world.
Followers of a peaceful religion do not hold followers of another religion like Naghmeh's husband, American Pastor Saeed Abedini, captive for 2 years in Iran for no other reason than his faith in Jesus Christ.
Organizers say people in more than 500 cities in over 30 countries have committed to pray for Saeed and the persecuted church. Stay tuned for my exclusive interview with Naghmeh Abedini later in this show. Coming up, the global response to Ebola. With the death toll doubling every 3 weeks, world leaders take action to stop this plague. A bit of good news in the fight against Ebola this morning. The third American missionary who came down with the disease has been released from a Nebraska hospital. In West Africa, however, the crisis grows by the minute. The disease could potentially infect more than 1 million people by 2015. That's why the U.S. and world leaders are joining together to fight the illness. Lori Johnson has the latest.
The scene is all too common. West Africans in agonizing pain outside overcrowded, understaffed treatment facilities. Sometimes patients are admitted while others die waiting.
It's kind of pathetic, to come and then see patients dying all on the ground and nobody to even see them.
The death toll, which doubles every 3 weeks, now stands at 3,000. The World Health Organization says it's actually much higher because of unreported cases.
If ever there were a public health emergency deserving an urgent, strong and coordinated international response, this is it.
Speaking to the United Nations, President Obama pledged 3,000 American troops and $1 billion to build treatment centers. But the U.S. will not provide the 8,000 healthcare workers needed to staff them. The State Department created a new position, Ebola Coordinator, and named Nancy Powell, the former ambassador to India, to the post. Her mission, bring other countries into the fight. Meanwhile, Boston physician Dr. Rick Sacra received a clean bill of health after contracting Ebola last month.
Ever since I committed my life to Jesus as a young man, he has loved me, stood beside me, and given me his grace. But the outpouring of grace that I have experienced during my fight with Ebola has been especially generous.
Sacra's treatment involved an experimental drug called TKM Ebola. That, plus blood transfusions from Ebola survivor Dr. Kent Brantley and other medications, helped strengthen Sacra's immune system. He became infected in West Africa, where CBN's Operation Blessing is helping to prevent further spreading. Workers are providing chlorinated water for disinfecting, medical supplies, and partnering with local Christians to teach hygiene.
And so it's church volunteers that are forming these Ebola prevention teams. So they're wearing T-shirts, going out into the communities, being the boots on the ground, really helping spread the message of prevention.
Health experts say while Ebola is not likely to spread to the United States, the possibility increases each day the virus rages out of control in Africa. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Up next, an American pastor marks 2 years inside of one of the world's worst prisons, and his wife marks 2 years of trying to set him free. Our exclusive interview with Naghmeh Abedini is next. Earlier, we told you about last night's prayer vigil outside the White House for American pastor Saeed Abedini. Today, vigils are being held around the world to call for his release from an Iranian prison. It's now been 2 years since he was arrested and locked away for his Christian faith. His wife, Naghmeh, has led the fight for his freedom, but the journey has been long and painful. When Naghmeh Abedini married the love of her life, she never dreamed they would ever be apart.
I'd never dated before Saeed, and he was my everything. And I processed everything with him, my best friend.
Saeed Abedini, an Iranian-born pastor and U.S. citizen, is serving 8 years in one of Iran's worst prisons for doing nothing more than preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. The Iranian government also calls him a national security threat for openly practicing his faith outside of their country. While in prison, Abedini has endured torture and threats from guards and fellow inmates. He has also suffered from internal bleeding and other health issues, but prison officials have denied him proper medical attention. Now, 2 years later, he faces yet another threat inside the prison walls from members of the terror group ISIS.
They've been beheading Christians all over Iraq and Syria. And here's someone who converted from Islam, and he's an American citizen, and so they want his life in that prison. So it's been really intense for him in that prison.
Saeed's parents can visit him once a week, but he has not been able to call his wife back home in the U.S.
My heart cries because it misses Daddy.
It's a painful reality for Naghmeh and the couple's 2 young children.
I pray that Dad come back home, but he's still not back home.
My son was 4 and my daughter was 5. My daughter just turned 8, so this was her 3rd birthday without him. But looking at them and realizing, especially when I heard the 8-year sentence, thinking, they're going to be teenagers. And I never imagined, just too painful to realize my kids will grow up without their dad. And it's been a painful journey. I've had a lot of emotional days.
My name is Naghmeh Abedini.
Naghmeh has turned that pain into a crusade for her husband's release. She has taken her case to both the United Nations and the U.S. Congress. She says at times she feels abandoned by her country.
There has been no efforts to get him out outside of a few statements here and there. I really do believe that Iran, if there's incentive, they will release him if someone's stern with him.
The UN recently issued a report on Abedini's case, in which it strongly condemned Iran and called for his release. First, Saeed and his wife felt bitterness against Iran. Now, Naghmeh prays for her husband's captors, and that God would use Saeed's story for his glory, even if that means she never sees him again.
It's been really this tense moment where my eyes have to be on Jesus. And every day, if I turn it to Iranian government and what they're saying or our government, I will fall. I can't look at who's saying what and who's doing what for Saeed. I just have to look at Jesus.
Because Saeed believes in forgiveness of sin through Jesus Christ.
One positive result of her journey, a unique platform to share the gospel.
You know, just all over the world, to sitting across from ambassadors to government officials, and each time telling them that Jesus is the answer.
It's a message Saeed also shares even while in chains. She says his letters tell of how he hugs those who persecute him and leads Muslims to Christ.
He's in the darkest place, and he's sharing Christ where they would never have a chance to hear about Christ if he wasn't there. You know, I've heard that some of the prisoners have said, I don't feel in prison anymore. I feel free because I found Christ.
She says while her heart aches for her husband's safe return, his story is strengthening the body of Christ around the world. More than 460 prayer vigils in 30 countries will mark this anniversary, with a specific focus on the persecuted church.
We're coming together and praying, and it's amazing. What our governments are doing, our government and the Iranian government, means nothing to me. My eyes are on the Lord, and that's where Saeed's deliverance will come from. And that's why this day of prayer is so important to me.
That's why Naghmeh says she will keep trusting and believing.
I had to take it to the Lord and say, I want my husband, but home soon now. But even if something happens to him, I'll be okay. You're a good God, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and saying, God will deliver me, but even if he doesn't. And I had to, sacrifice my Isaac and say, I give it to you. I give my future, my life to you. And whatever happens, I'm going to be okay.
She's confident that Saeed would agree.
Just knowing Saeed, that his chains are causing people to be saved, or I know that he would say it's worth it. If I die in this cell, it's worth it. And that's what keeps us going, is knowing that it's for Jesus. He paid the price for our sin, and he deserves our life.
And you can join the fight to free Saeed Abedini by signing a petition at the American Center for Law and Justice website. Find the link at our site, cbnnews.com. There you can also find more stories about Naghmeh's fight for his freedom and the suffering he's endured in that Iranian jail. We'll be right back. Finally today, a Christian rap artist made history this week when his latest album landed at #1 on the Billboard charts. Lecrae is earning praise from mainstream media outlets. And as Ephraim Graham shows us, he's now bringing his talent to the big screen.
Metaphors, self-degradation, very popular. Dramatic pauses. It's nice. Thank you. What is?
If laughter is the best medicine, the film Believe Me aims to heal its audiences and please the fans of hip-hop artist Lecrae. In between a stop on The Tonight Show and his album tour, the chart-topping Christian rapper is making his first movie appearance.
Why'd you choose this film to make your acting debut?
I feel like this film, in many ways, chose me. The irony of it all is the film doesn't quite fit in a category, you know? And I feel a lot of times neither do I.
Believe Me is written and produced by young filmmakers Will Bakey, Michael Allen, and Alex Carroll.
So Believe Me is the story of 4 college seniors that start a fake Christian charity in order to embezzle money for their college tuitions.
This is the first feature for the filmmaking trio. The idea was born years ago as they promoted their documentary, Beware of Christians, to Christian groups on college campuses.
I guess we have a twisted sense of humor because we kind of started thinking, you know, what if someone took advantage of this platform for their own selfish gain?
We want something that's funny and refreshing and that you can relate to and that you can say, yeah, like, I'm glad that this movie was made.
Believe Me hits theater screens at a time when the entertainment industry is embracing films with a faith message. In the last few months, we've seen box office success with films like Heaven is for Real and God's Not Dead.
But this film is part comedy, part drama.
Many people wondering, so are we making fun of Christians here, or what are we doing?
A little bit, you know. But the important thing to remember is that the filmmakers are Christians, so if anything, it's kind of self-deprecating.
It also asks its audience to think about what they truly believe. And that's a question Lecrae poses to his fans, believers and non-believers alike. The answer isn't always easy.
If you really want to make an authentic depiction of how faith and culture meet, you're going to be at odds with both faith and culture.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, New York.
People go to charity events.
And that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day and God bless.